Forward Media. This is Healthcare Musings. I'm your host, Dr. Hashem Hasabala. Welcome, everybody, to Healthcare Musings. Happy to have you with me. I'm very delighted to have Dr. Rafael Leite. He's a professor of medicine and an intensive care physician from Brazil. He's otherwise known as the Thoughtful Intensivist on Substack. I've been following him for quite a long time and very intrigued at his views about the sepsis guidelines and critical care research, and so I really wanted to get him on the show to give us his perspective. Dr. Leite, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you.
It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm so happy you invited me so we can talk about so many interesting things about sepsis and about our specialty. So it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to have a nice conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. So I want to understand what is it? I was there in Chicago when the guidelines were released, and I looked at them, and I actually had a couple of episodes commenting about them. And then you just started right away kind of attacking them from the very beginning. Like, and if I encourage everyone to subscribe to his Substack. His way is very interesting to read, very critical, and that's why I wanted to understand what is your problem with. Let's just start with the sepsis guidelines. What is your problem with the sepsis guidelines?
You know, I think we have to start talking about my problems with critical care research. You know, I've been around in intensive care unit since 1996. So we have 30 years. I think you have more or less 30 years of critical care too. And of course, everyone can see that our field is stagnant. There's no discovery. We evolve by subtracting therapies, not by adding new therapies. I had a couple of years trying to be a researcher in sepsis, and then I realized that the whole sepsis research building is rotten and it's coming down. So, wow, what a statement.
Yes.
So the thoughtful intensivist come as I would say a midlife crisis. Okay, so I tried to find more time to find some time to write what I think about our specialty research, critical care research, and the sepsis construct. You know, I just posted something a few days ago saying that I'm a supporter of the Surviving Sepsis Campaign and a supporter of the Surviving Sepsis guidelines. Because what are those guidelines? What do you read there? It's standard care, platitudes, banalities, like you should give some amount of crystalloids. Okay, you should give antibiotics. Where's the innovation? Where's the ambition? You know, so it's part of my problem with our research establishment is that they lack ambition. They aren't really trying to find something new or something that would really help our patients. And but make a long story short, I think it all comes from the very sepsis definitions, from the very construct, the clinical construct, as Dr. Angus used to say. Our failure research establishment has failed miserably in the last 30 years because sepsis research is funded is based on bad science. That's my short answer. So
So,
I
okay, so I mean, but it's not for a lack of trying. I mean, I remember when I was in training, activated protein C had come out, and then earlier than that, I was a medical student, and it was happening before when they did the antibodies, the monoclonal antibodies to endotoxin. So they've tried. I mean, we've been studying research. We've been studying sepsis and the sepsis cascade and the inflammatory cascade for decades, as you've seen. So it's not out of for a lack of trying. We've
no.
tried, and
Yes.
it's failed because it's just it just doesn't. It's such a complex disease
Yes.
process that you can't manipulate one thing and then expect people to get better. So it's not. I mean, we as a community and research has tried, right? Or what's your thought?
Well, yes, of course. I think the sepsis research community has tried until 2006, and maybe those three trials on early goal 2010. But I think by that time, uh, it, it was becoming increasingly clear that we wouldn't get anywhere with the current theoretical framework. That's my point, is the theoretical framework. It just didn't work, okay? We tried in 1989, we tried methylprednisolone for sepsis, and it was the beginning of the dysregulated infection paradigm, and it failed. And so this early failure should have raised our eyebrows, should have informed us that we have a problem with the very definitions. So I think we are talking about epistemology, no?
Right.
The science of
Epistemology, right.
yeah, the science of how can I know what I know. So in part, my Substack is about critical care epistemology, if you will. So how can I know what I know about sepsis, and mostly how should I formulate a useful paradigm, a useful theory? You know, that's my point. So yes, I agree. They have tried a lot, but from 2006 to 2010 until now, I think people aren't really trying. That's my point.
So okay, so your point, you have a problem with the I love the term epistemology, the sepsis epistemology. From a clinician perspective, here's what I see when the patient comes in with sepsis or septic shock. They have an infection and they have organ failure as a result of the inflammatory response to that infection, and that organ failure is trying to kill them. And my job is to try to stop that process as best support the patient and try to counteract those processes. So that's what I see at the bedside, that the infection is trying
Yeah,
to kill the patient, or the
yeah.
body's inflammatory response to the infection is trying to kill the patient. Isn't that the definition that is in the guidelines, that sepsis is a dysregulated host response to infection that causes organ failure? I mean, isn't that what it is? Like, what's your problem with our epistemology?
Well, I think the sepsis as a result of dysregulated inflammation hasn't been proved in clinical trials. We have this theory, but we never proved it because we never achieved the regulation of inflammation. Okay, so it's not proven. The whole theory requires that you consider sepsis to be a distinct, a separated entity from infection. Okay, so I think it's the earlier mistake. So it's a mistake they made in the 90s, in the late 80s. From this earlier mistake, many things went wrong. Many things were created, like the SOFA score, the DMOS paradigm, uh, and the epical failure, the epical mistake isn't touched. Então, I'm like, it's like I'm trying to point to this mistake. So it's
Okay.
how I'm trying to do.
How would you prove? How would you go about proving that sepsis is a dysregulated host response to infection? How would you prove that in a randomized in a clinical trial? How do you prove that? I mean, haven't they measured cytokines and all these things? I mean, so how do you go about proving that? You say it hasn't been proven, so
Yeah,
how would you prove it?
it hasn't been proven because we only study septic patients. So when we apply those triage tools like SOFA, Quick SOFA, News, and etc., we are we are triaging in the patients, but we don't study the patients we triaged out. Was that clear, my pronunciation?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So we don't know how infection becomes sepsis because we only study the group that is septic. We should compare people with infection, but not with sepsis. Okay? So we can prove there is a relation on TLR4 receptor or any one of the hundreds of biomarkers you can think of. So I think that the mistake, the epical mistake, the original mistake is defining sepsis as something different from infection. And I think this mistake manifests for us at bedside as sepsis definitions, as the current sepsis operational definitions. So I think there is a huge selection bias here. You see, we don't know how those biomarkers work in people with infection, but without sepsis. That's it. That's one point.
So that's very interesting. So yeah, I don't think we've ever because I was about to say there are plenty of people, in me too, who have gotten infection but not septic, right? They haven't developed organ failure,
All the time.
and that's why I think that's why people have made it as a separate entity, because it's like a Venn diagram, right? You have infection, and then you have organ failure, and then when the two intersect, that's sepsis. But you're saying it's not a distinct clinical entity. It's just it's a subset of infection. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's a point
Interesting.
I'm trying to make. Uh, we should I think we should abandon the word sepsis. Trying to be even more polemic here, but we should use the term complicated infection instead of sepsis. So what makes an infection complicated? Of course, we may keep the word sepsis, of course. It's important to raise awareness about the disease and so forth. But I think we are talking complicated infection here.
Very interesting. Well, so it's like the difference between a simple pleural effusion from a pneumonia and an empyema. Is that the kind of theory? Like it's just a different. It's a more severe subset of infection rather than its own disease.
Yes. And when we finally stop lumping patients together with using these triage definitions, if we resort to complicated infection as an umbrella term, then we will advance to find the specific phenotypes of infection, of complicated infection. But if we only study those patients with complicated infection, because I know I'm going to make a prediction here. This precision medicine fed sepsis and ARDS is about to fail in the next few years. There's no way it works because we are not talking about ARDS here, but it has the same problem, the same epistemic problem.
Interesting. So that's very fascinating. I've never thought of it that way, that it's not a separate disease. It's actually a bad infection, a very severe infection. Interesting. So a complicated infection. So, okay, but now you said I am a support. I read that. I read that Substack article. I'm a supporter, and your sarcasm was
Yes.
bleeding through. I mean, come on, you know, you had a picture of a cheerleader. I mean, it was
Yeah.
clearly sarcastic,
The cynical
right? I mean, it
cheerleader.
was clearly sarcastic. So, I mean, they're saying. I mean, they're just trying. Now, to be fair, nothing was earth shattering about the new guidelines. I mean, it confirmed what we knew was right. You give antibiotics as fast as you can. If they're
Yeah.
hypotensive, you give fluids as aggressively as you can, as quickly as you can. You start vasopressor therapy as soon as possible. You don't have to put a central line right away. You can do non-invasive blood pressure monitoring. So these are the things that we've been doing. And now there have been some research trials that have been conducted, and I know you may have issues with them, that kind of lend support to that kind of practice that has been evolving over times. But isn't that what the guidelines are supposed to do, is to say, well, what's the literature out there and what's best practice for this disease entity or this
Yeah.
clinical condition?
Yes.
So why you were saying I'm a supporter, but it was clearly sarcastic. So
Yes. That's
what's
clear.
what's your problem with just making statements that kind of make sense, but then you have the authority of international guidelines behind it.
Mhm.
What's wrong with
Yeah.
that?
Well, I think we are wasting energy on this dead end. That's my problem. It's a science mimicry. Okay, it's a science mimicry. Uh, well, people gather and they discuss, and after 5 years, they deliver us a couple of banalities, standard of care. We are losing time here. We are losing time and energy and lives and careers, such careers. No, sepsis. They should be very concerned about how do you model sepsis in preclinical research. How do we model sepsis in the lab? They should be very concerned about that. They shouldn't be concerning whether you give 1 or 2 or 3 liters of crystallite. No, this is no revolution. This takes us nowhere different from where we are right now. So that's my point. So
So oh,
I'm
go ahead.
a cynical cheerleader, as I said, because of course I support the standard of care. Of course, I'm going to give antibiotics and the amount of fluids I think the patient needs. Of course, I'm going to start pressors. I'll instead of simply watching the patient die. Of course, so it's I don't know. They should be doing something else. That's my point.
Okay, so if you were to design a sepsis trial, how would you do it?
Great question. Thank you. Wow. I've been thinking about this for many years. I think we should not lump patients using triage tools. Okay. So I think we must climb this mountain. That will be years of work, but decades, maybe a generation worth work. But I think we should understand the response, homeostatic response to infection, and then we should delineate, we should define the phenotypes of dysregulated infection. So what we have here, the sepsis definitions, the sepsis construct, it it uh, it doesn't allow for the preclinical researcher to model sepsis in the lab. You know, no one knows what is sepsis. No one knows how we can define it at the molecular phenotype level. No, so how can we expect that a preclinical researcher can model it in the lab to test? So I think I am for an outright dismissal of the sepsis definitions of sepsis or of current sepsis definitions, because it has proven that we are not advancing based
Mm.
on it. That's it.
That's very interesting. So you would want to start from scratch and
Yes,
compare
that's right.
people who, say, for example, have a bacterial pneumonia, but they do fine. They're not hypoxic. They don't have respiratory failure. They don't have renal failure. They don't have shock. And then compare those people with people who have pneumonia and ARDS, respiratory failure, and compare the two and see how are they different. That's
Yes, yeah.
very
That would be a 10,000 feet view of this approach. We should we will find different phenotypes of infection. So like I'm trying to do I will try to do an analogy here. So I think critical care is where cancer or oncology was in the 1920s or the 1930s. You know, cancer is cancer. No, now we have I don't know, hundreds of different types of cancer, each one with its own treatments and its own treatment hypothesis. So I think we should follow the example of oncology and rheumatology also, and try to find different phenotypes and
different
then
phenotypes.
test.
And then test it. That's actually fascinating. Okay, but perhaps the reason why we've failed in your mind or in your with the epistemology is because it's such a complicated it's such a complicated disease that doesn't have. I mean, some people manifest sepsis as just encephalopathy.
Yes,
That's what I say all the time. People don't come to the emergency department saying I'm septic.
yes,
They come saying I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm throwing up, I'm dizzy, I passed out, I can't breathe, I'm having chest pain. I mean, and then the organ failure from infection manifests itself.
yes.
Is it perhaps, do you think it's just a fool's errand to try to define this disease that's so complicated and manifests in such a different way in so many people because of genetic variations and
Yeah.
and differences in people and human makeup? Is it is that the problem?
Yes, that's the problem. And it's going to be much more complicated because in the real patient, that old lady that you saw yesterday that came to the hospital confusion and febrile, we don't know when her infection became a complicated infection. So we don't have the time frame for the phenotypes. And there's one thing we know. I mean, there are two things we know about inflammatory response. First, it is redundant. Okay. And the second is that we don't know the time frame of infection. So it's impossible to be modeled in the lab. You know, this is because translation is impossible. Research translation is impossible because in a lab model, in a sepsis model, you know exactly at what time did the infection started in the mice.
That's
Yeah.
right. Right. Because you perforate the bowel of the mouse at time 0, right? And yes, that's
So
true.
it's I don't know if we we are Middle Asian, man. I don't know if we are going to see it, but I think it's the only way. I think it's the only way.
That actually makes a lot of that makes a lot. So in your mind, these whole hemoperfusion studies where they run the blood through filters and things, do you think that's going to fail as well?
Well, I'm not a native speaker of the English language, so I usually try to avoid slang, but I think it's bullshit.
Oh my God, that's so funny. That's so funny. It's a very interesting take. Well,
Yeah.
but what you're proposing is to destroy the edifice
Yes, I
of.
just
I
wrote
mean, this
that.
is it's a diagnostic code. Hospital systems get more money because of it. I mean, it's a whole. I mean, okay, it's the number one diagnosis that comes into
Yes, it
my
is.
intensive care unit. You are proposing eliminating the raison d'être of our field, right? The
Yes,
reason that
yes,
we exist.
yes. Like we did in the 90s with the pulmonary artery catheter. That was our defining tool. Yes,
It
that's what.
was. I put in dozens and dozens as a
Yeah.
trainee.
I say I spent the best part of my 20s measuring cardiac output on Swan's catheters. Yeah, I did. Yes, I think we
So you think sepsis should go the way of the Swan Ganz catheter
yes, and ARDS too. I know.
and ARDS too? Well, okay, then what would you call? Okay. So then, if somebody comes in with a urinary tract infection and shock and renal failure, you would call that a complicated UTI?
Yes, complicated UTI, and we can have these syndromic terms like hypoxemic respiratory failure. Okay, that's okay. But when you well, when we use words or terms like ARDS, we are pretending it is a separated nosology, a separated disease, and it is not. Uh, uh,
It's just a severe manifestation of aspiration
Yes.
pneumonia or
Yeah,
pancreatitis or.
yes. So when we lump the patients together using these triage tools, what I call it, ARDS and sepsis are triage tools, we end up with a case mix of very different disease. And we keep pretending, we old guys, we keep pretending that all those patients share the same mechanism, the same biological mechanism. Of course they don't. So of course, this whole field of research is not going to find anything. Okay, so ARDS research is stopped, has stalling since VILI, since ventilator induced leg injury. We don't have anything new, and we won't have. So if I were a ARDS researcher, I would stop now. I would try to do anything else of my life, because they are not going to get anywhere. That's my point. Because
Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, and I guess because you have a very valid point, because I think all of the sepsis trials have failed. All of
yes,
them, whether it's activated protein C, monoclonal antibodies to endotoxin, or now maybe the hemoperfusion, they're kind of on a shaky ground. I mean, you have a valid point, because there hasn't been one.
yes,
I mean, basically, it's fluids and antibiotics as fast as possible, and that's how you treat it.
yeah, okay,
Right.
okay.
And maybe vasopressors, right? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Uh, Evidence is on my side. You see, evidence is teaching us year after year that those paradigms should be abandoned.
Wow. I mean, it's you make a very valid, but what you're proposing is a threat to I mean, you're saying it's research careers and
Yes,
revenue for hospitals and public. I mean, this is it's very wow. It's very provocative. And
yeah,
and that's why I wanted to get you, because I read your articles, and I can sense just the seething skepticism. But it's a very, very valid point. It's definitely food for thought. Well, Dr.
yeah,
Leite, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and it's a
yeah.
lot of food for thought. And we'll definitely stay in touch. And and
Yes.
if something else comes on, I'll definitely have you back.
Okay. Waiting for that. That
Thank you
was
so
a
much.
pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening. Sign up at healthcaremusings.com to get every episode delivered directly to your email. And please don't forget to leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much.